I enjoy the one on self. So that's what our topic is tonight, is self-development. All right, so let me share my screen. Okay, so our objectives tonight are appreciating each child, promoting children's sense of self, developing a sense of racial identity, guiding children in expressing their feelings, and helping each child flourish. Are you ladies able to see this okay without me making it large? You know what? I'll just go ahead and make it large. 1 second. Okay. All right, so each child's identity is shaped over time. They develop attributes, abilities, attitudes, and values that define them. Now, these are shaped by families, by communities, by relationships, as well as actions and responses to others. So let's think about that for a minute.
No, I got my camera off.
When we think about, I think I just admitted
Now they can see me.
somebody. Who did I admit? Oh, Harley. Harley's here. Okay. Hey, Harley, we're glad you made it. Okay, so anyway, when we think about children and we think about the different types of families they come from, we're going to get more into that later, but we think about communities. We think about relationships within those families and relationships within those communities. I want you to think about how actions and responses of others help shape children, and they help shape who we are. And so our personalities play into our sense of self as well. Now, let me give you an example of some things. So I'll just use me and my husband for an example, okay? So we have very different personalities, but we have very similar family values. We respond to others differently, but we both came from middle-class families. We're Caucasian, Christian families in the Midwest, yet we are very, very different. And so you think about why. So here we are, we're both same generation, same part of the Midwest, middle class, Caucasian, Christian backgrounds, but yet we're extremely different. And so there's a lot of things that went into that. And so we'll talk about some different things tonight that causes change, causes the difference in people and how sense of self is shaped. So here's what I want to start out with for just a minute. I want you to look at these 4 things I've listed, but I want you to think even more than that. I want you to think about 2 things that you believed helped develop your sense of self. I want you to think about your family structure. Now, that could be things like whether you're oldest, middle, or youngest child. It could be whether you came from a large family or a small family. It could be whether you came from a 2-parent family or a 1-parent family. I want you to think about all those things within your family structure. I want you to also think about your culture and your culture within your culture. Okay? I want you to think about if religion affected you at all, how your peers may have affected you and your sense of self. And so I want you to think about those and anything else that comes to your mind. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to break you out into rooms. I'm just going to I think I'll put you in 3 rooms. The smaller groups are kind of nice. And I want you to just I'm going to put you in about 7 minutes probably. I just want you to have some discussion about that, okay? So let me put you up here. I'll try to put you with people that I think you'll be comfortable with. So I see the La Petite girls here. You girls will go in room 1. And 2, I'll put the UCP girls. And then in room 3, I'm going to put the Mega girls in Savannah. So, okay. Let me see here. Does it tell me? Here we go. All All right, we're gonna do, like I said, 7 minutes. All right. Interesting. Okay, so did you find that interesting? Was there anything that anyone wants to share that kind of stood out to them that you're, as you think about it, you realize it really helped shape your sense of self?
What?
Can I have a haircut tomorrow?
Everybody's gonna get one.
Yes, for JRTC.
I hear somebody in the background somewhere. Everybody mute it only because you might not want to share some stuff. That's but if you want to share, I would love to hear what you want to share about our discussion.
So Jordan and I kind of had the same structure. We were the oldest of our family, so we had more responsibility and kind of had to be the one to mold the rules and be the role model to our younger siblings. And as we got older, you know, branching out and doing things that aren't exactly on the line like we had to when we were younger, I thought that was something that was really interesting to share with someone.
Yeah, that responsibility of being the oldest, you know. Yeah, sure.
No, Dana,
Too. I was the oldest.
Jordan and Kinsey there. I was the youngest, but I'm actually the role model. So, yeah, I graduated high school before my brothers and sister got it. They ended up in jail, both of them did. And then I ended up going through college before they did. I'm actually the only one that has my kids and actually works. So I'm more of a role model. My parents look more to me be the responsible one than my brother and sister were. Just like when I was growing up, I was the one that was cooking and cleaning and stuff.
So, you know, there's some other factors, of course, that always play in different things, because obviously just the oldest doesn't always end up being the responsible one. Those are
Yep.
not always true.
Yep.
Yes. You have to take into account all the different things that go into shaping a child.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm really not trying to be rude. My boss is texting me right now, which is very odd, but it's about school being closed tomorrow. I don't know if you have heard this, but apparently school is closed tomorrow now. And so she's wanting me to change some of my training for tomorrow. St. Joe School District. Okay. That's all I know of. But anyway, so I apologize if I seem like I wasn't really paying attention. But you know, when your boss texts you, you respond. Anyway, okay. So, did anybody else have something they wanted to share?
Sure.
Okay.
All three of our moms stayed at home with us growing up, which I thought was really surprising because that's pretty rare, especially now.
It is. You're right. It is
And
very much.
that definitely influenced like that. I don't know.
Absolutely.
Like this-
Absolutely. Yes, I had a stay-at-home mom. She didn't go to work till I was 23. And that absolutely influenced me, because then when I chose to go to work, I kind of felt guilty about that, you know, because my mom had been there all the time. So then, you know, in my mind, she was the perfect mom. So how was I going to be a perfect mom and not do exactly what she did, right? Yeah. So I completely understand that. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. Okay, so children's experiences also help shape how they see themselves. You know, like if they see themselves as valuable. So we can go back to school days and see how that really makes a difference. You know, did you have teachers that made you feel valuable? Like they listened to you, they acted like they were glad you were there? Did you have peers that made you feel valuable? Did you play on a team that made you feel valuable? I remember that first experience with the softball team, and I did not feel valuable. And in fact, I felt like when I walked up, the coach was like, "Oh, she came back." But isn't that funny? Because I was like 8 years old, and I remember that, you know, that I didn't feel valuable. I also remember a lot of teachers who did make me feel valuable. I can tell you Mrs. Frakes, Miss Flattery, Mrs. Bueller. Isn't it funny how we can name them? we can remember, right? The ones that make us feel valuable are important. Children need to feel important. They need to feel respected. I think that's a hard one sometimes for us as teachers, to help children feel respected. A lot of you are pretty young on here, but my age, we were raised that you grow up and you're often seen and not heard, and you're just always respectful. Now, that's true. I think we should be respectful. But I was kind of taught that I'm respectful to someone regardless of whether or not they are respectable, I guess. And while I still think there's some value in that, I think as teachers, it's important for us to understand that, we can get a child to fear us, but I would much rather them respect me. And the way that happens is through respecting a child and the fact that they have feelings and emotions and thoughts. And so they get a sense of belonging when they feel accepted. Children, when they know they're part of a school family, when we create that environment of a family, when they know they're listened to and that their feelings are validated, even when we don't understand or agree with them. So when a child is upset, not just saying to them, oh, you'll be okay, but saying, I don't know why she's so in a fit because her shoelaces won't lay right. Doesn't make sense to me. But, instead of saying that's something silly to be upset about, over saying, oh, that really bothers you. You just don't like it when your shoelaces don't lay right, do you? Just being validated, even when we don't understand it. They get a sense of belonging when they develop secure attachments. And that doesn't just mean within their home. That means with their caregivers. So, that's why hugs are so important. Warm greetings. I love you rituals. For those of you who are familiar with conscious discipline, but I love you rituals don't have to be the conscious discipline. I love you rituals. It can be, just greeting a child with the same phrase every day, or ending the day with the same phrase, or when it's nap time, doing the same ritual. I love you rituals. All they need is eye contact, touch, presence, and playfulness. So even if you're tickling a child, that's an I love you ritual. Children need to be called by their names. So I am really horrible I'm one of the worst about giving children nicknames. Hey, sweetie. Hey, honey. Hey, cutie. And those are nice and they show love, but I can call anybody that, and it shows a child, it validates a child when we call them by their name. And so, we need to help them develop secure attachments. And then they also get a sense of belonging when they trust those who care for them. So caregivers need to help them feel safe. They need to feel secure and supported enough to explore, take risk, and solve problems. So I think about children, you can tell right away if children feel safe enough to take risk and explore. So you have those children who they're like, willy-nilly, let me go all through the classroom and I'm going to try anything and everything. And then you have those children who they look at you every time like, can I do this? Is this okay? Am I going to get in trouble for this? Those children don't feel safe enough to do that. Now, does that mean that you're unsafe? No. It means, though, that they are being shaped by something, right? Probably within their home. There's a lot of rules, or maybe even not a lot of rules, but then every once in a while someone snaps about something and they're not sure what to count on. That's why schedules create such a sense of safety for children. But we want our children to realize we're okay with the exploration. Now, that doesn't mean there's no rules, but we want to set up our environments in a way that's exploratory friendly for them, and where they can feel safe, take risks, and learn to solve problems. So we also need to encourage our children. Well, I said this, so to take risks and solve problems, but the reason that we want to do this, we don't want to solve all their problems for them. We want them to learn to problem solve, because this will create independence in them. When we solve all their problems, it just creates dependence. Do you know children that they can't make a decision? Well, you know what? Let's say this. Do you know adults that can't make a decision? Like, it's time to go out to eat, and you're like, Well, I don't care. Well, I don't care. Well, you decide. Well, you decide. Right. Okay. I mean, like, we want to develop children who can make decisions, you know, who are sure of themselves and what they want. And so allowing them to take risk and solve problems will help them do this. When we solve all their problems for them and tell them what to do every time they do it, we actually stunt their creativity. They do not learn to think outside the box. And it's really sad to watch a child who is like, what do I do here? What can I do? What am I allowed to do? Instead of just trying to get in there hands on and figure something out. And it slows their growth and development. When we are allowing them that freedom to explore, their growth and development just accelerate. And then other factors that contribute to self-development are things like gender, temperament, approaches to learning, and family circumstances. So, when we think about gender, I know that in the world we live in today, a lot of times we like to pretend that gender doesn't make a difference, but it does, and it does. I mean, there are things that most boys tend towards more and girls tend towards more and less, vice versa. For example, math. At a younger age, boys usually enjoy math type things, building with blocks, rolling trucks up and down inclines, math concepts. Girls, we kind of tend to enjoy the social things. And do you know that's a brain thing? So I can't tell you the exact amount, but if you've ever heard Brad Mears, he's an expert on brain development. There's something in our brain that actually causes us to talk more than a man. And like men don't need to. I wish I could explain it all, but I can't. But girls are just more social. And so that's going to play into their sense of self and their development. Temperament. We know those children who they are like crazy wild little children. And when we know those children who are like really quiet and really shy, we have the mild-mannered children and the loud children, and all of that plays into their sense of self. How they approach learning, they're hands-on, if they're auditory, if they're visual learners, their family circumstances, we've talked about this. All of these things contribute to a sense of self development in a child. So how can we help children develop a sense of trust? Give me some thoughts about this. Anybody? What are some of the things you do in your classrooms that help your children to trust you?
So when my kids come in the mornings, I get down on their level after they're done hanging up their backpacks and their jackets, and I'll greet them like either with an I love you ritual or a hug if they're having a rough time. And it helps them feel comforted when they're going through the transition of getting out of the car and coming in, because right now parents can't come in the building to drop off and pick up. So when they have that extra comfort knowing, I feel like that helps build their trust.
For sure. And what you're doing at that moment is you're not only you're building trust, you're making that child feel valued, important, respected, safe. So many things are happening in that moment because you are recognizing a need and you're meeting that need for them.
I
Yes,
have
Jordan.
one. Oh, sorry.
Oh, well, I seen Jordan's hand. So, okay, Jordan, you go ahead and then Mikey.
When we mirror what they're doing when they're playing, or ask questions about what they're doing, just to be interested in what they're interested in, that builds trust.
Absolutely, yes. Mikey?
Okay, so not so much with work stuff because I'm in the infant room. And yes, they trust me, but it's harder to build that with babies because they don't remember it all the time. But my brother's 5. And if I tell him I'm going to do something, I make sure that I do it with him. Like if I say I'm going to play a game with him, I make sure I do it. Or if I say that I'm going to color with him, I'm going to do that, or anything like that. Like if you say you're going to do something, make sure you do it because they will remember it and they'll be disappointed if you don't do it.
That's true. That's true. And they'll remind you over and over if you don't. That's very true. Yes. Okay. Anybody else want to share anything?
Something that comes to mind to me, which I don't have a background, but like when you tell your kid that you're gonna leave, like make sure you tell them that you're leaving. Don't sneak out on them, because then they don't trust, like they lose that trust that you're not gonna be there. Like even if they're crying and they're upset that you're leaving, it's better to tell them that I'm leaving now, I'm gonna go and I'll be back, than it is to just sneak out on them. And
Absolutely, Emily.
teaching
Absolutely.
parents
I
to do
wish
that.
everybody would do that. You know, so my 3-year-old granddaughter, when she was 2, she started going to church with me, and she would go to Sunday school. And I would always tell her, Mimi's coming back. I'm coming back. And my best friend was her Sunday school teacher, and so she would reinforce that for her. But she would say that to my best friend. She would say, my Mimi's coming back. She always comes back. My Mimi comes back. And she adjusted so well with that. And I did that with my boys too, though. You know, when they're young, knowing they would cry, it was better off. And I'd apologize to the person I live with. I'm sorry that they're going to cry, but they need to know I'm coming back, and they'll get over it quicker knowing that. And so I totally agree with you, Emily. And I hate when people sneak out. I just think that creates a feeling of anxiety in children, you know, that they don't know when or why their parents going to sneak out. It's really hard to watch our children cry and get upset, but they're going to cry and get upset whether you watch them or not. You might as well feel secure.
That's why I've had parents before, they're like, oh, if they go play over there, I'm just going to sneak out. I'm like, please do not do that. Please tell them that you're leaving. That is the best thing you can do. I know they may cry, they may fuss. We will deal with it on that end and help them try to calm down. And if we absolutely cannot get it to work, we'll do it. We'll try it again. But
Yes.
I would rather them tell them that you're leaving, because then the look on their face when they turn, and the panic that they can't find their parent because they snuck out on them, is awful.
And that is so wise, Emily. I'm glad you brought that up. And I'm glad that you encourage your parents to not do that. Yeah, for sure. Okay, I want to show you a little video clip. How many of you have heard of ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Experience? Okay, so I have a little video here. I'm going to show you about 8 minutes of it. And what this is it talks about trauma and how it affects people. It's extremely interesting. She's going to use some big words that you might be like, what does that mean? Because I do the same thing. I don't know what that means, but it don't really matter, because you'll get the overall picture of what she's saying as you listen to it. She's an extremely intelligent woman, but it's really interesting to see how trauma affects us in so many ways. And so anyway, let me share this with you. Okay, I pause this just for a minute because I can't see you guys. Can you hear? Can someone just unmute and tell me if you were able to hear the sound?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure what's happening now. I'm trying to get it fixed. Give me a minute here. Okay, I'm going to go out of here a minute, or at least let me go back here again and try this again.
In the mid-90s, the CDC and Kaiser Permanente discovered an exposure that dramatically increased the risk for 7 out of 10 of the leading causes of death in the United States. In high doses, it affects brain development, the immune system, hormonal systems, and even the way our DNA is read and transcribed. Folks who are exposed in very high doses have triple the lifetime risk of heart disease and lung cancer, and a 20-year difference in life expectancy. And yet doctors today are not trained in routine screening or treatment. Now, the exposure I'm talking about is not a pesticide or a packaging chemical. It's childhood trauma. Okay, what kind of trauma am I talking about here? I'm not talking about failing a test or losing a basketball game. I am talking about threats that are so severe or pervasive that they literally get under our skin and change our physiology. Things like abuse or neglect, or growing up with a parent who struggles with mental illness or substance dependence. Now, for a long time, I viewed these things in the way I was trained to view them, either as a social problem, refer to social services, or as a mental health problem, refer to mental health services. And then something happened to make me rethink my entire approach. When I finished my residency, I wanted to go someplace where I felt really needed, someplace where I could make a difference. So I came to work for California. My entire approach. When I finished my residency, I wanted to go someplace where I felt really needed, someplace where I could make a difference. So I came to work for California.
I don't know what's going on here. Let me try to go ahead a little bit and see if it works.
Thousand children. So we hung a shingle and we were able to provide top quality care regardless of ability to pay. It was so cool. We targeted the typical health disparities, access to care, immunization rates, asthma hospitalization rates, and we hit all of our numbers. We felt very proud of ourselves. But then I started noticing a disturbing trend. A lot of kids were being referred to me for ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. But when I actually did a thorough history and physical, what I found was that for most of my patients, I couldn't make a diagnosis of ADHD. Most of the kids I was seeing had experienced such severe trauma that it felt like something else was going on. Somehow, I was missing something important. Now, before I did my residency, I did a master's degree in public health. And one of the things that they teach you in public health school is that if you're a doctor and you see 100 kids that all drink from the same well, and 98 of them develop diarrhea, you can go ahead and write that prescription for dose after dose after dose of antibiotics, or you can walk over and say, what the hell is in this well? So I began reading everything that I could get my hands on about how exposure to adversity affects the developing brains and bodies of children. And then one day, my colleague walked into my office and he said, Dr. Burke, have you seen this? In his hand was a copy of a research study called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. That day changed my clinical practice and ultimately my career. The Adverse Childhood Experiences Study is something that everybody needs to know about. It was done by Dr. Vince Felitti at Kaiser and Dr. Bob Onda at the CDC, and together they asked 17,500 adults about their history of exposure to what they called adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. Those include physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, physical or emotional neglect, parental mental illness, substance dependence, incarceration, parental separation or divorce, or domestic violence. For every yes, you would get a point on your ACE score. And then what they did was they correlated these ACE scores against health outcomes. What they found was striking. Two things. Number one, ACEs are incredibly common. 67% of the population had at least one ACE, and 12.6%, 1 in 8, had 4 or more ACEs. The second thing that they found was that there was a dose-response relationship between ACEs and health outcomes. The higher your ACE score, the worse your health outcomes. For a person with an ACE score of 4 or more, their relative risk of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease was 2.5 times that of someone with an ACE score of 0. For hepatitis, it was also 2.5 times. For depression, it was 4.5 times. For suicidality, it was 12 times. A person with an ACE score of 7 or more had triple the lifetime risk of lung cancer and 3.5 times the risk of ischemic heart disease, the #1 killer in the United States of America. Well, of course, this makes sense. You know, some people looked at this data and they said, come on, you have a rough childhood, you're more likely to drink and smoke and do all these things that are going to ruin your health. This isn't science. This is just bad behavior. It turns out this is exactly where the science comes in. We now understand better than we ever have before how exposure to early adversity affects the developing brains and bodies of children. It affects areas like the nucleus accumbens, the pleasure and reward center of the brain that is implicated in substance dependence. It inhibits the prefrontal cortex, which is necessary for impulse control and executive function, a critical area for learning. And on MRI scans, we see measurable differences in the amygdala, the brain's fear response center. So there are real neurologic reasons why folks exposed to high doses of adversity are more likely to engage in high-risk behavior. And that's important to know. But it turns out that even if you don't engage in any high-risk behavior, you're still more likely to develop heart disease or cancer. The reason for this has to do with the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the brain's and body's stress response system that governs our fight or flight response. How does it work? Well, imagine you're walking in the forest and you see a bear. Immediately, your hypothalamus sends a signal to your pituitary, which sends a signal to your adrenal gland that says, release stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol. And so your heart starts to pound, your pupils dilate, your airways open up, and you are ready to either fight that bear or run from the bear. And that is wonderful if you're in a forest and there's a bear. But the problem is what happens when the bear comes home every night. And this system is activated over and over and over again. And it goes from being adaptive or life-saving to maladaptive or health damaging. Children are especially sensitive to this repeated stress activation because their brains and bodies are just developing. High doses of adversity not only affect brain structure and function, they affect the developing immune system, developing hormonal systems, and even the way our DNA is read and transcribed. So for me, this information threw my old training out the window, because when we understand the mechanism of a disease, when we know not only which pathways are disrupted, but how, then as doctors, it is our job to use this science for prevention and treatment. That's what we do. So in San Francisco, we created the Center for Youth Wellness to prevent, screen.
Okay, I'm gonna stop that for a minute right there. So just for a minute, I just want your thoughts about that video. Anybody ever heard that before?
I've heard it before. That now that I see it, yeah, I've heard of people talk like, and it makes sense. Like if you're always in that hyper, because that's happening to you all the time, you're always in that state of fear, fight or flight.
Yes. And so when we think about our children, so this study was done on middle class Caucasians, and 12% of them had 4 or more. So we tend to think these types of things only happen in lower income, socioeconomic struggling classes, and it's not true at all. Trauma happens it touches every race, every economic class. It doesn't matter who you are or where you live. So now, no matter what children you serve, no matter what their family looks like, we really have no idea what they have experienced in the way of trauma. And trauma really helps a child shape their sense of self in a negative way often. And so just being aware of how it can really affect, and even into our adulthood. So the parents that you deal with, probably 12% of those parents have 4 or more ACEs scores that have helped shape them into who they are. We ourselves here, I'm sure probably there's 1 or 2 on here who have, maybe 4 ACEs scores if you were to take the test. And just being aware of that. So we don't use it as an excuse, but I didn't let you watch the rest of it. But it kind of sounds like, well, there's no hope for someone who has no, there is. And the hope is in relationship. It's in connection. It's in meeting those children's needs in different ways, through relationship, through teaching the parents skills, through education about health and different things. So there is hope, but it's important for us to realize as educators that our children may come into us just looking like an average normal child, but there are things that are shaping them and their sense of self, and helping them become the way they are. And our job is to help that in the most positive way that we can. So let me go ahead and share some more here. Let me get out of that. Okay, so when we think about sense of self, it also includes roles, behaviors, and attributes. So facts about children or ourselves that we associate with others and ourselves. It's how we identify ourselves. For example, someone might say, I am tall, I am physically strong, I am the oldest in my family. So those are facts, but they are also what we would call attributes about them. So like for me, I might say, I'm short, I have blue eyes, I'm the oldest in my family. Those are attributes that we would use to help create our sense of self. But also there's self-esteem. And so this is a person's perception of their own self-worth. And this comes from inside them, but also how a person feels others perceive them. For example, someone might think I'm a good friend because they've been told that, or they have done things that make them feel like they are a good friend. Or they might think that they're creative because, again, maybe they've been told they're creative, or maybe they have done some things that they have feel are very, very creative. So that comes from self-esteem and how they feel about their own self-worth. Now, true self-esteem is often tied to an action or accomplishment. And that's honestly what we want to help children with, is true self-esteem. So this is why jobs in the classroom are so important. They help build self-esteem through success and accomplishment. I don't know how many of you utilize jobs in your classroom. This is a big part of conscious discipline. Now, obviously with a baby's room, you're not going to have jobs for babies, right? That just doesn't make sense. But as young as 1 year old, they can have a job. They can be the light helper. They can help pick up trash. They can help wipe up the table. They can be first in line, right? And so how many of you have those jobs in your classroom? If you, by raise hand. Okay, so you know how children guard those jobs, right? How they take them so seriously and they don't forget, and they'll fight over a job. Like if there's a coveted job, they're going to fight over who gets to that job, right? And the reason for that is because those jobs make children feel important and valuable, and they find success and accomplishment in those jobs. And so that's how we build self-esteem. It's not by saying, oh, you're such a good child. Oh, you did this perfect. Oh, you did that just right. That causes dependency. What brings real true self-esteem and self-confidence is allowing them to accomplish things through jobs and through success. So we want to think about that and the importance of doing that in our classrooms, but also there's something I want you to think about for a minute. So we are doing a lot of self-reflection tonight too. So it's almost impossible to help others develop self-esteem when we struggle with it. And so self-talk can be very helpful and even important with this. So I'm going to show you this video. Now, it's meant to be kind of silly, but it's kind of relevant. So let me show you this really quick. This one's really short.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the class. Let's begin.
Girl, you are so fat and ugly. No matter how hard you try, there will always be someone better than you. You'll never be good enough. Nobody really likes you anyways. You should just give up now. You're so unlovable. You don't even deserve to live. You should just kill yourself. Namaste.
Okay, so kind of silly, right? But the point of it is actually very relevant. You know, many of us have probably said a lot of those things to ourselves before. You'll never be good enough. Doesn't matter how hard you try. Are you pretty enough? You're no good at that. You don't deserve that, right? So the things that we say in our head often translate to how we deal with others. If we're really hard on ourselves, we are often likely really hard on others, whether we actually say it out loud or not. You know, sometimes we can put on a good act, but really in our mind, if we're very judgmental of others, we're often very judgmental of ourselves. And that's hard to get past because for whatever reason, we think we deserve to do that to ourselves, to judge ourselves. And so what I want us to do for a minute is a little activity that I have, because here's the thing. You really can't teach self-confidence if you don't have it. You really can't. I mean, you can try, you can say all the right things, but self-confidence is really learned through modeling and through actions and through success, not through what is said. So let me show you something here. So do you guys have like a piece of paper and a pen close by that you can utilize? Hold on a second. Wait a minute. We're not going to do that yet. We're going to do that in a little bit. I'm sorry. But I do want you to stop and think about how you talk to yourself. Because how you judge yourself is often how you will judge others. And I didn't think that was true for a long time about me, but I realized when I became a coach that it really is. So I have all these expectations of teachers that I had of myself. And it was kind of hard to get past that and realize that I was passing that on, and rather than having this objective perspective, that I was just so hard on myself that then I was kind of being too hard on others. And so it was something I had to really work through. But okay, what I want to do now is I do want to take about 5 minutes. This is 10 minutes, but really just going to take about 5. I'm going to break you out again in room. But this is what I want you to think
Dana,
about this.
I may have to step away for just a second. My little guy fell and busted his lip open really bad.
Oh no, go take care of him. Go take care of him. Thank you. But I do want you to think about for a minute something that someone said or did that affected your self-esteem either positively or negatively at some point in your life. Get out of here for a minute. And so I'm going to break you back out, and I just want you to share that. It can be either positive or negative, but you know without a doubt that it affected your self-esteem. Okay? All right, here we go. Harley, oh, there you go. Okay.
No, no, no. Don't hit my stuff.
Hi.
Come on, let's go downstairs.
Cute. Okay, so I kind of popped in to listen to some of y'all, and it's so interesting because it don't matter who it is, me or whoever, we usually go to the negative first. It's like we remember that. We remember those times when people made us feel less than, right? But it was interesting to hear Mikey's last one though, because she was talking about how she bowled like professionally, like at 8 and 9. And she was saying how that really boosted her self-esteem. And going back to how success and accomplishment boost your self-esteem, right? So she found something that she was good at, that she could be successful at. And that's not saying that we shouldn't try things that are difficult or hard for us. But when we think about our children, we really need to realize the power of the things we say and what our faces say. We probably have all at some point received looks from whether it's a boy we liked or a mean girl or a teacher or someone who really hurt and made us feel less than. And, we tend to do that sometimes with our kids. And I don't think we always do it intentionally, but, the disappointment, the irritation, we just need to pause and think about what we're saying to children. And even especially like when they're creating things, even if it's not appropriate, being very careful of how we approach that so that we're not discouraging. I remember one time a little boy drew a self-portrait and drew all his body parts. I'm sure you probably have seen that or gotten close to that before, and my initial reaction was to go, oh my goodness, but what would he think if my face looked like that, right? So, making your face look normal, that's interesting. What are you going to do with your picture? Because, we're not going to hang out in the room. I'm not going to tell him that, but I'm going to say that, oh, Mackenzie, I'm sorry. Okay. Go take care of your baby. But, saying, well, I think you should take it and show it to mom. Maybe mom wants to put on her fridge, right? Because we're gonna do the appropriate things, but we're not going to overreact, because maybe he really did a really good job and was really trying to portray himself, and not inappropriately, and so, not making judgments about things. And then also thinking about the activities that we provide for our children, thinking about how to make all of them successful when we do it. So if we're providing like a cutting activity, because just thinking about that, I know, Abby, you're never going to provide a cutting, or Michael, you're never going to provide a cutting activity for your babies. If so, they're probably going to move you out of that room. Anyway, but thinking about that, because that's difficult a lot of times for children, right? So if I want my children to experience success, but yet be challenged, and they very rarely use scissors, I am not going to give them something difficult to cut out, right? I'm going to possibly give them paper without anything on it and just let them cut away. Now, I might provide also papers that have shapes on it for those children who are ready to accept that challenge. But I'm not going to give that to, I have in the past. I can go back and remember giving those papers to children who did not have that skills, and them saying, I can't do it. I don't want to do it, and putting their scissors down and just being so discouraged, because I gave them something that was just impossible for them. And instead of starting them out where they were ready and working their way up to that, I just discouraged them. So, thinking about these things with our children, because some children are like, can't do it, not doing it. and it really affects them a lot. So we just need to think about these different things with our children. Let me see how much we have left, because I kind of want you to do this quiz, but at the same time, I want to make sure we can get through what we need to get through. You know, we might come back to that, okay, if we have time. Okay, so our sense of self, how we see ourselves, and our self-esteem often develop and change over time. I know this is true. So can you girls think about like when you were in elementary school? And think about how you saw yourself. Like, were you confident? Were you shy? Willing to try things? And then I want you to think about yourself maybe as a teenager. Were you the same? Were you different? And then maybe as a mother, a young mother, or just a young adult. So I, of course, am 50 now. So I've experienced a lot of change. But when I go back and I think about my high school years, I was a fairly confident young woman for the most part. But then I got pregnant pretty young and had 3 kids like this, boom, boom, boom. And all my friends were still in school, going to college, what have you. And I was being a mom with 3 kids in the house every day. And you can imagine, you know, I did not look great all the time. I looked disheveled most of the time. Baby talked, you know, I was in the house 24 hours a day with 3 little boys. And I remember my confidence going like, you know, and I just never felt good about myself. You know, I felt good about what I was doing with my kids, but, you know, I just kind of lost myself for a while being a mom, you know. And then, you know, going back to work and things changing, and again, accomplishment and success, rebuilding that self-confidence. So, you know, over time, our self-esteem develops and changes. Sometimes it gets better, sometimes it gets worse. And we're influenced by how we perceive ourselves and how others perceive us. And so ways to build self-esteem in the classroom, like we talked about, is using jobs, also noticing. And Jordan kind of hit on this earlier when she was talking about you didn't use this word, but imitating what the children are doing, making comments about what they're doing, that's noticing. So noticing what the children are doing help build their self-esteem. Now, when I talk about noticing, I'm not saying go over to the child and say, good job, that's awesome, that's great, because those are pretty generic and then they become dependent on those. But just noticing, I noticed that you added red to your paper. I noticed that you built a tower going up, or I noticed that you're laying your block straight, or I noticed that you created a pattern. Just noticing actually builds their self-esteem. Encouragement does as well, and we're going to actually look more at that when we talk about adult-child guidance, so I'm not going to get into a lot of that tonight. But we also want to value each child's family and culture, because family is part of their identity. So those of you who have children know that the quickest way to make you irritated is to criticize your children. Right? That's the quickest way to get on your bad side, right? You know, if I said to Mackenzie, oh, your kid clumsy, he needs to get over that, right? She would have been mad at me, and I didn't even think that, right, at all. He's a little boy that, you know, boys are little roughhousers sometimes, you know, poor baby. But same thing with our families for the most part. You know, we're protective of our families. Even if we don't like everything about our families, don't you talk about my family, right? And so the family helps to shape us. And people are often loyal to their families, and it's part of their identity. So when you criticize their family, or when you talk about their family in a negative way, that's a reflection on them, or that's how we take it anyway. You know, someone says something critical about my mom, I take that personal. If someone says something critical about my children or my husband, I take that personal. And so we need to value each child's family and their culture. So you have difficult parents. That's the reality, right? That we have difficult parents we deal with. Well, guess what? Your children can pick up on if you don't like dealing with their parent. Or your children can pick up on if you don't agree with something that their parent does or the way that they do something. And that makes that child feel less than. And so we don't always have to agree with parents, what they're doing, to value them as people, even when we don't understand why they do the things that they do. And so it's really important that we portray that to children, that we value them and their culture and their family. So in thinking about that, I need this to get up here where I can see it. Sorry. It's okay. I don't know why this isn't letting me see this. Hold on a second. That's not what I want to do. Okay, let me get out here. Having technical difficulties tonight. Okay, so children do notice differences. A lot of times we like to say things like children don't notice color. And that's true to a certain extent, it is. But oftentimes children do notice color. They just don't care about it like you do as you get older. It's been shown that toddlers as young as 2 recognize differences in race. And that 3 to 5-year-olds can not only categorize people by race, but they also often begin to express bias based upon race. So they begin to pick up subtle cues from others about self and others based upon their race and attributes and physical characteristics. And they do this, of course, within their families, within their communities, within their schools, from their peers. That's where these things start, these biases. And so we have to help them see each other in a positive way. That doesn't mean we ignore differences, but that we teach acceptance of them. And we know that everyone in every culture is different, and there are even cultures within cultures with differences. So not all Latinos are the same. I have a cousin who's married to a Puerto Rican. Well, when they first got married, I didn't know that. I thought he was Mexican. And when I said that, he was so offended. Puerto Ricans do not want to be called Mexicans. They have a lot of differences. And so just being aware and not being afraid to ask polite, honest questions to find things out. Not all Asians are the same. And so just being aware of that. Well, even all Caucasians, there's a lot of different Caucasians, right? And a lot of that does go into your heritage. If you have a Jewish background, or if you have a German background or an Irish background, we think about St. Patty's Day and how the Irish love that and different things that are in their culture because of that. So all these different cultures. So we want to try to represent these cultures in our room. So why do you think it might be important, not just because of anti-bias, why would it be important to represent these cultures in your room?
To make them feel important.
Mm-hmm.
Like to make the different kids feel important.
I agree with you, but Mikey, what if you have a classroom of all Caucasian children? How are you going to represent other cultures in your room, and why would you?
Because once they get out of my classroom, they're going to experience other cultures because we live in America. So it's important to have that different side of make sure that they know that there's different kinds of people.
Yes, to be exposed, because it's awkward when you find a child who's never been exposed to a different culture and they're suddenly exposed. Sometimes they're fearful. Sometimes they're extremely curious, which can be a little uncomfortable at times. And so, yes, exposing them for sure. I think often about, sometimes I went out to Maysville and coach, and it's a very rural area with all the children that I've always seen there have been Caucasian and farm children. And so it's extremely important for them to have pictures and have books and even bring in visitors of different cultures, because those children don't see that very often. And you're right, when they get out in the world, that they're going to experience that, and they need to be accepting of that and not fearful of it.
Yeah, even in the baby room, like we have a book that says, I am dark and I am proud. And it has like all different kinds of races in it. And I have a little girl who loves that book. If she's 1, she'll go over there and she'll spend 30 minutes looking through that book.
That's cute. And I do want to share you a little story with you. So when I was teaching years ago, we would every year we would have like a multicultural week, and we would all do self-portraits, and I always got out the multicultural paper for the children to choose from that they could create themselves. And one year, and these are 3 to 5 year olds. So one year I had this little African American boy and a little Caucasian boy. And it was so funny. The little African American picked out the whitest white piece of paper there was, and the little white boy picked out the darkest dark paper there was to make themselves. So those two truly did not see color at that point. It was so cute. But a lot of children do. A lot of children will say, well, why is your skin brown? Or why is your skin white? Or whatever, and I think we should welcome those questions and those conversations. And so then ask, do all the children in your room see themselves and their families represented throughout the room? Are they exposed to these different cultures? So I'm sure that a lot of you, especially in St. Joe, see a lot of different cultures in your rooms. And so you want to make sure that all those children are represented in your room. You want them to look at the walls and see themselves, or children that look like them, or families that look like theirs, so that they feel part of the school family. That's really important to creating their sense of self, that they feel valuable and a part of. And then we want to help children to express their feelings effectively too. So we want to give children words. This will help their self-esteem and their confidence. And we don't want to say, use your words, okay? I rarely recommend saying use your words. Number 1, you say that and they may use words you don't want them to use. Number 2, they often don't know what words you're talking about. They don't have the words or the vocabulary or the skills or the language to know what to say. Sometimes we need to give them the words. We need to actually say this and that. And as they begin to use those, they'll learn those skills, and they'll learn what words to use the next time after they've been practicing them. But we need to give them appropriate words to express themselves. You can also use things like feeling buddies. Those are a conscious discipline thing. They have the little dolls that have the different faces with the different expressions. Or you can find charts that have different facial expressions, picture books. And so these help children identify how their face looks. A mirror is a great thing too. Even a child as young as like 1, you can hold a mirror up to, and you can say, your face looks like this. Oh, you're sad. You're sad because you wanted your bottle and you can't have it yet, or something, or you wanted your binky and so, whatever. And so, just helping them to identify their feelings and express them appropriately. And so we want to acknowledge their feelings. Conscious discipline suggests is using the DNA process, and what that means is describing, naming, and acknowledging. So like, your face is going like this. You seem sad. You were hoping you could have your binky right now, but it's time to eat, whatever. So acknowledging, giving children the emotions, creating a safe place to teach self-regulation. Our whole classroom should be a safe place, to be honest with you. But there's nothing wrong with creating an actual safe spot to go and teach them tools away from other children when it's disruptive. But here's what I'll tell you. For those of you who may have tried to create an actual safe spot in your room, it will never be successful if you yourself are not a safe place first. You have to be a safe place that the children can come to and learn to regulate. And then what you do is you take them there and you begin to teach them the tools. And I'm not going to go over all those tonight. We'll learn those more in another class. But we do want to ultimately teach them self-regulation. But we can't do that unless we're modeling calmness and reason. And so I will say this too, sometimes we can think we're modeling calmness and reason, but inside our clackers are just going like this. And kids can figure that out. I remember, are you all, how many of you are familiar with Jill Mully? How many of you know who she is? Okay, so anyway, she is a certified master instructor for the conscious discipline curriculum. And she goes around teaching it everywhere. She's taught it in St. Joe for like 15 years. And anyway, I've had the privilege over the last 5 years of working very closely with her. She comes and works with our people at Head Start. And since I'm the trainer, I get to work with her anyway. I remember her coming and she would work this magic stuff. And I remember she'd leave and I'd say to her, I did exactly the same thing you did and said exactly the same thing you said, and it didn't work. This child didn't calm down, you know? And she's like, okay. She said, but were you really calm inside? Well, no. Inside, I was like, this isn't going to work. It's not going to work, but I'm trying to act like it's going to work, right? Well, kids know that. They figure it out. They clue into that. And so to really be a safe place, we really need to truly use our self-talk and tell ourselves we can handle this. We got this. The worst thing that's going to happen is a child's going to scream and holler for a while. You know, we're going to work our way through it. And so just helping ourselves to stay calm helps children to feel safe. And then we want to encourage children to solve problems independently, but they have to practice. Practice, 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 practice. We are not going to be able to teach children how to solve a dispute, even if we did the same thing 10 times. That 11th time, they're not going to remember every step to do. And so they need a lot of practice, and that's what we do in preschool. And I'm going to teach you the 6 steps of conflict resolution, but not tonight. I'm going to teach you it when we do social development. And teach children emotion words. So be descriptive. Use words like, oh, you seem frustrated. Oh, you're being silly. Oh, you feel fantastic. You know, teach them these other words, these descriptive words, so that they can really really become really comfortable with themselves and how they feel and be able to identify it. Okay, so we're going to look at something for a minute. We've still got a half hour here, and I really like this activity. So this screen here, I'm going to put it up here for a minute. I'm going to give all of you 5 minutes, and I want you to use your pen and paper, and I want you to pick 5 things out, each one of you, that you want for children. The 5 things that you think are the most important things that you want for children from this list. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. How close are we getting? Do we need a couple more minutes? Mikey's shaking her head no. Who else? Okay, if you have your 5, give me a thumbs up. Okay. Okay, so now what we're gonna do, we're gonna go into breakout rooms again for 5 minutes. And this is what you have to do with your team. You have to narrow your list down to 5 that you agree on. So you're not all going to have the same ones, and you're going to have to decide which 5 between your list are the most important. Does that make sense? Got what I'm saying? Okay, so let me see who we got here. Make sure I still have enough people in each room. Yeah, we're good. Okay. Did I hear a bird, Emily?
Yeah, something like that. That's my daughter.
Okay.
She's in the other room making noise.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, so let's start with the La Petite group. Can one of you share the 5 that you came up with?
Yeah, I can share them. So
Perfect.
we had considerate, sensitive, healthy, positive, and determined as our 5.
Okay. All right, I'm kind of trying to write them down here real quick. Okay, so what about the UCP ladies? Do one of you want to share?
Okay. We had intuitive, persistent, self-sufficient, considerate, and self-confident.
So the only one the same on that one was considerate. I'm going to circle that one. And what was the last one? Self-confident?
Yep.
Okay. All right, what about the last group? Does someone from there want to share?
Yes, I have them. We have kind, positive, self-confident, healthy, and sincere.
Okay. So 3 of those were the same: considerate, healthy, and self-confident. So those 3 were picked more than one. What I want us to do now is just have a little conversation and see if we can come up with 5 among all of us. So I guess my first question is the considerate, healthy, and self-confident. Do you think those are 3 we can all agree on that were chosen more than once? Anybody disagree on any of those? Speak up. This is a conversation.
The healthy one doesn't matter as much to me.
Okay, and why?
I mean, because I don't know how to take it. Like, I don't know if it means like physically healthy or like emotionally healthy. Because I mean, sure, those are great, but I don't know if there's a child that's going to come in like perfectly emotionally and physically and mentally healthy. And we at UCP work with kids that are not some of those by default. So I don't know, that one I don't think it's like a mandatory. I understand the thought behind it, but it's one that I could throw out.
So, okay, so I would have chosen that as one because I guess what I want for children is to be healthy. I think that it's important. It affects all of them. But I love that you spoke up, Jordan, because your UCP perspective gives a total different look at that, where I could see where you would say, that's probably not something I would pick. And I see why you would say that. So thank you for speaking up and sharing that. So let me tell you what we have on here between what you all have picked. And I want you to think about what you would choose. And I would just be brave enough to speak up and we'll just have some conversation. So sensitive, positive, determined, intuitive, persistent, self-sufficient, kind, positive, and sincere. So thinking about those, just those, I know that was a lot to remember, but what stood out to you? Who's willing to speak up and say, I really think this one.
I don't have like a specific word, but I think one thing that I did notice is a lot of those words, like they don't mean the same thing, but they're like essentially the same thing, like sensitive, considerate, intuitive, like those all mean like being kind to your friends and like being like knowing yourself, like those all kind of mean the same thing. So
that's what I was looking for. So if we used considerate, we could really kind of take off kind, right? Would you agree with that? Because if you're considerate, you're probably kind. So I wouldn't think any of that was so. And then if you were considerate, what's another one that you'd be like, that probably don't need to be on there because if you're considerate, you're probably
like intuitive
doing that.
usually. Intuitive might be the word
I
that
can
you
see
put at the top and then replace, like, if you're intuitive, you're probably considerate because you're thinking of other people's feelings. You're probably kind because you're thinking of people's feelings. Like, you're probably pretty sensitive because you're thinking of your feelings and others' feelings.
Anybody agree or not?
It's all in the category of being empathetic. Not empathetic. Yeah, empathetic.
Not empathetic.
Being like feeling other people's emotions and taking them into account.
And it seems like we all really care about that. And we want our children to be that way. And I think that's so important, don't you? Especially in our world today. So we could take off. So if we put those 4 together, intuitive, considerate, kind, and sensitive, which one would you say is the best? I heard Abby say intuitive. Does everyone agree with that? Or is there a different one that you feel kind of sums it up better?
I mean, empathetic would be a good one, but I don't think that was on the list we had to choose from. Like Mikey just said that, but.
Well, we can put it on there. Who would rather say empathetic than all of those? Okay, we're gonna just do that.
There might be more. I mean, I don't
Okay.
remember the list, but there might have been a couple more on that little list too that would go under the list.
I don't remember them all either.
That's actually our word of the month at Mega is empathy. So every month we have a word that we teach in all of our programs, and empathy, and each place has they have a definition for little kids, then 6 to 10-year-olds, and then and they do projects on them and stuff, and empathy is our word this month that we're teaching the kids in our classes.
That's awesome. That's great. Okay, so we have empathy and self-confident because we got rid of considerate and we're unsure about healthy. So that leaves positive, determined, persistent. Now, determined and persistent, pretty similar, right? We also have sincere.
Sincere could go under empathetic as well.
It could. So then if we take that off, if we went down to determined and persistent, which one would be the most important?
I feel
Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say I feel like determined is your internal determination, and persistence is what you do about it. So I feel
I think you're right. I think you're right. So which one do you think?
Hard to decide if you would rather want to just have the determination to do something, or if you would want to have the persistence to actually get it done. I guess persistence, because
I don't know if you would have the persistence if you didn't have the
determination.
Yeah, but if you just have the determination, you don't do the persistence.
The follow through, right? Okay. Well, what about self-sufficient? How many really want that for our children? I think that's really one of the ultimate goals, right? Is for our children to be able to go out and handle the world and deal with things and be confident. So, okay, here's what we got. Empathetic, self-sufficient, confident. And then we don't know if we like determined or persistent more, and we're not still sure about healthy. But then we have positive. So if we take positive and healthy, determined and persistent, what do we think is the most important out of those?
I would say either determined or persistent, because I really liked her point about being healthy. Obviously you want that, but that's not you should be able to work around that if it's not the case. That shouldn't be the ultimate. If they're not healthy, they're not a good kid. You know what I mean? Especially with mental health. If they have depression or something, that does not mean they're a bad kid. And I guess positive, you would nix that one too for the same reason.
Well, then we only have 4, but that's okay. Because the point of this was really just to really evaluate what we want for our children and why we want it, and also to recognize the perspectives of it, how it can look different. I remember I did this a few years back, and one girl picked rebellious, and I thought, why would you pick rebellious? Well, she said to me, now, and here's the thing, let me explain to you about her, just facts. She had her hair dyed extremely black. She had piercings everywhere on her face and her body and tattoos. No judgment, just facts. This is about her. So a person might look at her and describe her as rebellious, possibly. So when I asked her to describe that, she says to me, I just want children to feel like they don't have to follow the norm. Like they can be creative and do different things. They don't have to do what everyone else does. And I thought, makes perfect sense to me. That's how you're trying to live your life. You know what I'm saying? So it's how people define it too, you know? And so just, I think it's just good for us sometimes to think about what we really want for our children and then what that really means. But then, so if we choose these things for our children, if we choose self-confident, self-sufficient, empathetic, and determined, what are some of the things we're going to do to help them develop those characteristics when they're developing their sense of self? I guess think about the one that speaks to you the most, and then tell me something that you really try hard to do to help develop that in children. Jordan?
I think, I mean, for my son is 4, and I think empathy is like the hardest thing to grasp when you're a little kid, to see outside of your own head. So in our classroom, we try a lot of like, if somebody gets pushed or shoved, or you take a thing from someone, of like making it very clear what that person is feeling to the kid who did the thing, not in a mean way, but just like, oh, your friend looks like they're crying. Your friend they ran into the corner of the room because they didn't want to be over here anymore. It's that, like that, I don't know. We try to do a lot of that where they start to see the visuals that might lead to empathetic thinking. Because we don't need them to say sorry. Like, we don't do a lot of that. It's just a matter of like acknowledging the person's feelings. That is just great if they can do that.
The whole saying sorry thing just becomes an automatic response, and it becomes meaningless when you make them. So I agree with that, not making them, but drawing attention, noticing. And a lot of children who've experienced a lot of trauma, or even autistic children, a lot of times have a hard time making eye contact. So yes, helping them to look at faces, that's how you learn empathy.
Yeah.
So that's very good with that, yeah. What else? Anyone else want to share anything?
Mine would be empathy too, and just displaying it.
I go back to self-sufficiency a lot, because when my kids were little, I did everything for them. I think I shared that with you until they were like in middle or elementary school, and I realized I shouldn't. But anyway, so my grandkids, I let them be extremely independent, to the point sometimes that my husband thinks, what in the heck are you doing? You know, but everything they can possibly do, I allow them to do. Like, they take so many risks in my home, as long as it is perfectly, you know, not going to cause them harm. Friday had all 6 of them here. And anyway, from the 12-month-old to the 6-year-old. And anyway, the 2-year-olds to the 6-year-olds like to play crazy games. And so we have a play yard that they use as a cage. And so the 2- and 3-year-old are trying to figure out how to get in and out, which they're just that size where they could topple out real easy, right? So I'm like, okay, so, and I'm not going to come in there every time and put them in and out. So I'm like, how are you guys going to get in? So they found this little crate, and they turned it upside down. And I said, okay, but when you try to get out, you're probably going to fall in that crate. So what's going to happen? My 3-year-old granddaughter found pillows, packed them all around that. And I was like, okay, you're good to go. You know, but just that's something that's really stuck with me because of the experience I had with my children. And I just want my grandchildren to, you know, explore and problem solve and, you know, all that, risk take safely. But anyway, so, you know, I think it's good. I always enjoy doing this because I think it just opens our eyes to other perspectives. I'm really, truly glad that you said that, Jordan, that you felt safe enough to say that, because truly coming from that environment, I can totally see why you would say that. Let's see here. We got 4 minutes left. So I'm just going to make sure there's nothing else important that I want to show you really quickly. Nope, there's not. All right, ladies. So I just want to tell you thank you. I know that it's been a yucky, nasty day and you probably had other and better things that you could have done. So thank you for being here tonight and thank you for participating so well. Oh, Harley, I see your hand.
Yeah, Reagan wanted me to tell you that her laptop broke. I don't know
Okay.
if she got a hold of you or not.
Well, she may have emailed me, but I haven't checked it since a little bit here. So, okay. Thank you. Thank you, ladies. Stay safe.
So I have one more question.
Yes.
I know
Yes.
this doesn't have to like involve around the class, but did you say St. Joe's school districts are canceled?
That's what I was told. I was sent a message from my boss. Let me look at it one more time, make sure I'm not telling you a lie. She says, the centers, I don't know. She said the centers are going to be closed tomorrow. Now, I guess I just made the assumption that it's because of St. Joe's School District, so you better check.
Okay.
Because I don't know why else we would close. We don't close unless St. Joe School District does, but it seems weird that they would close when we haven't gotten that much snow. So you better check. You better check.
Supposed to be pretty bad though.
Well, and it might be if there was ice under it. So down here in Plattsburgh, we didn't get it as badly. I don't think as St. Joe did. So I would check with your local district.
At home, like my friend sent me a picture and they're supposed to get like 8 to 14 inches and it's already like crazy. Like, yeah.
No, thank you. Any other questions? All right. Have a good night.